What was it like on Black Monday in 1987? What was that like for you?
I was a clerk. I was not a broker yet. I was a retail clerk, and it was absolute chaos and insanity. That was my first sense of there was a lot of fear going around. I mean, the market was absolutely careening off of a cliff. There was no technology back then. It was all paper, right? So, basically orders were being spit out of a machine. The phones were ringing. We were getting orders, sell, 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 just like you would see in a movie. And brokers were just coming into the booth, and you would hand them stacks of orders to sell everything in sight. They would run out to the crowd, and just at that point, it wasn't a matter of negotiation. When a market is tanking, you just walk into a stock and go, I got 50,000 to sell. Where are the buyers? And then you would hit a bid. You would hit a bid. You would hit a bid.
Wow.
And then you would run into the booth, give me a report. I would call it up to the customer because you wanted to give the report to the customer before it traded lower. Right. You didn't want to say you sold them at $50 and then it had bounced back to 51, right? So the accuracy and the timeline of this whole negotiation is really pivotal. So it was crazy. It was one of the wildest days. I would say of all the crashes, I've seen every crash since 87, the bubble of 2000, crash of 07, COVID. Clearly the craziest day of all time.
What caused it? Do they know yet?
Yeah, they absolutely do. Yeah. So in each crash, and I've done a lot of talks about the different components that made up each crash that we've seen, right? And for each crash, prior to the crash, the markets were trading at record highs. And then something happened. Obviously, in the crash of 2007, what happened was that they were selling mortgage-backed securities that had nothing behind them, right? That was it. They were packaging products out and selling credit and houses to people who they knew could not afford it, right? And they ended up then their product was worth 50 cents on the dollar. They knew they had to unload it, so they put it in a nice little box with a bow, and they went and sold it to somebody for 50 cents on the dollar. Everyone's looking for a discount. They trusted the seller because he was Morgan Stanley, he was Goldman Sachs. They didn't think that I was being sold, an empty box, so they bought it. Right. And then what ended up happening, that they realized finally, when the market started to crash, they looked under the hood and realized there's nothing in this box. What they gave me is bad debt. So they tried to offer it for 25 cents on the dollar. So suddenly they went around this sale of massive mortgage-backed securities that were really becoming worthless, were going around the world to the point where the shit hit the fan and basically everything tumbled. That was the crash of 07. I'm not really clear about what facilitated the crash of the 87 crash. There were some insurance things. There was some potential technology that was starting to come into the marketplace. It was sort of a perfect storm. Markets can handle. We saw it during COVID. We've seen it during the interest rate crisis and all that kind of and inflation crisis. Markets can handle virtually anything if it's being given to them one thing at a time or two things at a time. But what ends up making a crash is when you have a perfect storm where suddenly everything comes together at once, right? Where the market cannot really digest all of this bad news that's happening, and you end up having a crash.